Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be continuing our coverage of the 1971 Candidates Tournament between Petrosian and Bobby Fischer. The winner of this tournament does go on to face Boris Spassky in the 1972 World Chess Championship. Now, so far, things are even. Bobby Fischer came out with the win in game number 1. Petrosian fought back with the win in game number 2, and there was a draw when Bobby Fischer played the white pieces in game number 3. So Petrosian playing the white pieces, game number 4. Going to be looking to take the advantage for the first time in this tournament. It starts out with c4, c5. We have the English symmetrical variation. Then after knight to f3, g6, we have d4. Now there's two lines that Bobby Fischer could go down. One would be to play knight to f6. This gets into the Benoni defense. Or he decided to go ahead and play with pawn taking here on d4. Did not want to get into the Benoni line. So pawn takes on d4, knight recaptures on d4, and then after knight to c6, we have e4. Now this is the Maroczy bind. This is a setup that you'll see in lots of different openings, most common in the accelerated dragon in the Sicilian defense. But from Black's standpoint, it's really difficult to penetrate with the pawns in the center of the board. Even if they push forward with e5, the knight comes back to c2, has control of the d file with his queen here. He can't really do too much bringing his pawn down here. Both these pawns in the center of the board, they can just recapture and have pawn supremacy here. So instead, if Black does play something, you're typically going to see like a d6 move from them. Bobby Fischer decides first to play knight to f6, and then knight c3 followed by d6. Petrosian now continues with f3. Couple different options that he had here, but one thing you do want to avoid if you ever get into this position yourself, you don't want to play something like bishop to e3. Holding down this knight here on d4 may seem tempting from this bishop. You know, the knight takes here and then the bishop recaptures. You have a pretty good setup, but really this loses to knight to g4. That's part of the reason that Petrosian is playing f3. Yes, it solidifies the pawn chain here, but it does stop this knight coming down here to g4. Yes, the bishop could also come down, but more than likely the knight's going to come down to g4, so it does stop that. Bobby Fischer decides to go ahead and take with his knight here on d4, and then the queen recaptures on d4. Bobby Fischer now brings his bishop to g7. Fianchettoing his bishop, getting ready to castle on the king side. Also opens up for a discovered attack if this knight were to move here. Petrosian brings his bishop to e3. This does open up the door for castling on the queen side if he wants to. Since he has control of this semi-open file on the d file, definitely a good option to give yourself options in case you want to castle on the queen side. This also makes it's a little trickier for Bobby Fischer in the center of the board to push with his pawns. We already talked about why pawn coming to d5 is going to be pretty difficult. Petrosian can capture with one of his pawns here, and he has a lot of protection from his other material in the center of the board. But now if we see something like e6, where you may not want to give yourself a backward pawn with e5, but maybe e6 can be met with castle on the king side. A lot of pressure that Petrosian would be putting on this center file right here. But even if Bobby Fischer does decide to play e5, yeah, you bring the bishop or the queen back, but it comes back to d2. This is protecting the bishop. The bishop can attack on the king side of the board. This is a great square, can even castle queen side a little bit later. But now Black has to worry about defending this backward pawn here on d6. So Bobby Fischer, recognizing that, although he wants to push forward with his pawn, decides first to go and castle on the king side. Then d2, just doesn't want to even have to worry about this pawn coming up here to e5, just solidifying his position even more and preparing if he needs to bring his bishop over here to the king side of the board. Now the queen comes down to a5. We do see the rook to c1. This pawn here on a2, although it's being attacked, it is protected by the knight here on c3. And this knight's not pinned down to the king as it generally would be. This queen here on d2 is protecting that. e6, just getting more pieces involved to the game. We have b3, just solidifying this pawn chain. Probably would have forced something on the board if instead of b3 we were to see like knight to d5. You'd probably see some exchanges on the board. But instead, Petrosian goes for what I'd consider the safer route, and that is playing b3. Rook to c8. Bobby Fischer just getting his rooks involved into the game. E2, preparing to castle on the king side if he wants to. A6, knight up to D5. We start to see some exchanges. Queen takes here, king takes. Yes, he has taken with his king, but really once the queen comes off the board, you don't really have to worry too much about kingside safety. That is, the queen's the main piece you have to worry about. But now you want to get your king involved into the game. So getting into the middle and the end game, your king in the center of the board is going to be more valuable. So that's why he decides to take with his king. Knight takes here on D5. We do see an exchange on the board. And then after the rooks come off, we see the king come back here to C1. And then after a few more moves, we see the sides decide to draw. Now, this is only 20 moves in. I actually think the Petrosian has some fighting opportunities. Now, I don't think anything is clear as day. Both sides are pretty much even on the board in all facets that you'd be looking at, but still 20 moves in, you have the white pieces. I don't think Bobby Fischer is ever going to win this game, but maybe he's looking at it and just says Bobby Fischer is an extremely talented in-game player, so he decides to go ahead and take the draw. So after 4 games, we're still tied up, both sides getting a win in the first 2 games, and then after that having a draw after both sides have the white pieces. So that is game 4. It's a short one, but we do have to go over all the games so you guys can see the entire finals in the 1971 Canada's tournament. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video, game number 5 from the 1971 Canada's tournament between Petrosian and Bobby Fischer.